Hi learners, welcome back to my YouTube channel Psychology Globe. I am Simran and I am back with yet another very interesting concept of psychology. So before we start today's video, please like and share and also subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon to get the further notifications. So the topic for today's video is classical conditioning. So before we discuss what is classical conditioning, let us know what is learning. So learning is any permanent modification, any long-lasting change that occurs in our behavior either due to practice or due to experience. So in our daily life, we learn a lot of things. We learn new behaviors, we learn new responses, we learn new concepts, we learn new habits. So all this happens either due to experience or due to practice. So this is the most widely accepted definition of learning. So the concept of classical conditioning, it was first introduced by Pavlov. So it is very interesting to note that Pavlov was not originally a psychologist. He was a neurologist and physiologist. He was interested in the digestion mechanism of the dogs. Now, he observed classical conditioning and he describes classical conditioning as a learning which takes place with the association of a stimulus with another stimulus. So this will become more clear when we discuss the experiment which was conducted by Pavlov. So before we discuss that experiment, we have to understand the four elements of classical conditioning. The first element is the unconditioned stimulus. The unconditioned stimulus is that stimulus which is naturally present, which originally occurs. Next is the unconditioned response. The unconditioned response is the one which is given in response to unconditioned stimulus. So the behavior which will be represented in response to unconditioned stimulus will be known as the unconditioned response. Third is the conditioned stimulus. Conditioned stimulus is the one which will be later introduced by the experimenter. And the last is the conditioned response. Conditioned response is the one which will come in response to the conditioned stimulus. It is generally similar to the unconditioned response. There is only a very slight difference. So now let's discuss the experiment which was conducted by Pavlov, in which he observed classical conditioning. Now what he did was, he took a dog. Since my artistic skills are not very great, so let's assume that this is the dog, and he caged that dog and tied it to a harness. He also performed a simple surgery whereby he inserted a tube in one of the jaws of the dog, and the other end of the tube, it was suspended in the beaker. So what was done in the experiment, every time the dog was presented with food, the dog used to salivate. So salivation is an involuntary response that occurred when the dog used to see the food. Now naturally also dogs eat food, so whenever they will see food, they will salivate. So the unconditioned stimulus that is naturally present, so I'm using an abbreviation for unconditioned stimulus, that is US. So the unconditioned stimulus is food that is naturally present, and the unconditioned response will be the salivation. Now a slight modification was made. Every time the dog was presented with the food, a bell rang. So always the presentation of food, it was preceded by a ringing bell. So now the dog learnt that whenever a bell will ring, then only the food is going to come. So the ringing of the bell, it becomes our conditioned stimulus. So the ringing of the bell is now our conditioned stimulus. Now on one fine day, everything is done in a similar manner. Only a slight modification is made that after ringing the bell, no food is given to the dog. But surprisingly, the dog still salivates. Why? Because he has learnt that after the bell rings, the food will always come. So this becomes our conditioned response. So even in the absence of food, if the dog is salivating, that is our conditioned response. And how we are able to generate a conditioned response? By associating the conditioned stimulus with our unconditioned stimulus. So this was all about the concept of classical conditioning. I hope it helped to clear your doubts. My next video is going to be on operant conditioning, which I'll be posting very soon. Till then, goodbye, take care.